Good afternoon, everybody. I present myself. My name is Carlos, and I am a representative of the Mexican government. Today, we are meeting to discuss a very important issue, how a modern state should be configured to ensure the integration of the cultural diversity and the creation of a real climate of equality and equity. I want to start by saying that the government is committed to the recognition and protection of the rights of indigenous communities. However, we must also take into account that the integration of cultural diversity cannot mean the loss of cultural identity of indigenous peoples.
Thank you very much. And hi, I am the leader of the indigenous communities. And thank you very much for your words. But let me say that the reality is that indigenous communities have been marginalized and excluded for a long time, where power has played an important role when it comes to talking about indigenous communities in Mexico. Since thanks to the discrimination exercised not only by the privileged society, but also by the institutions, we have not been given the opportunity to fully participate in the decision-making that arises, and as a result, our rights and our culture have been ignored.
As a representative of the International Human Rights Organization, I am agree with the leader of the indigenous community. The solution of the indigenous community are serious violation of the human rights, which is no longer only described as discrimination, but also as oppression, says we are talking about something systematic. As a representative of the International Organization of Human Rights, we are urged for the Mexican government to take concrete steps to ensure that the rights of indigenous communities are respected and protected.
Understanding your concern and sharing your point of view of the importance of respecting the rights of indigenous communities. In fact, the government has implemented policies and programs also to promote respect for protection of the rights of indigenous communities. We are working on it, as well as to promote social and economic inclusion, these two important aspects. Apart from that, according to the new statistics, we have seen an improvement in the access to education for Mexicans, just as medical care and other services that have improved in all the country.
If that's true, why do we still face issues like lack of access to education and proper healthcare, discrimination, and economic marginalization? I think that you are looking at the statistic in a general way, and you're not taking into account other factors that in this case need to be reviewed. For example, being Mexican is not the same as being part of indigenous communities, since the latter is a vulnerable situation. But also, if we consider gender, it means that as an indigenous woman, I am in a situation of double vulnerability. It is necessary for the government to listen and consider all the perspectives and needs of the indigenous communities in decision making.
That's right. An intersectional approach is needed that not only looks within Mexico, but also within these same communities and takes into account other identities, such as gender, sexuality, language, among others. In addition, it is important to remember that indigenous communities have their right to self-determination and full participation in decision-making process that affect him. The government must respect and guarantee these rights.
I understand. I agree. Participation and intercultural dialogue are essential to guarantee a fair and an equal society. Therefore, we must work together. It's not just my job, but we need to work together to find solutions and promote dialogue, and obviously to achieve inclusion.
I agree, but we need to make sure that we are given significant and equitable space in decision-making processes. And I will also like to stress the historical context, as although Mexico is considered an independent and decolonized country, it's not the same for the indigenous communities, because this hierarchy of cultures continues to exist where the indigenous are below. Furthermore, we need to concrete and effective measures to address the problems we face. We want proposals from the government, agreements that are enforced. That is why we want to express our concern, because for more than 20 years, with all the historical context that I already mentioned, since the independence of Mexico, we have been looking for solutions, and the government shows no interest in reaching agreements with us. And if agreements have been reached already, they don't show me the commitment to complete it. So why would this be different?
I understand your concern, but there are viable options to achieve it. As an organization external to the conflict between the Mexican government and the Zapatista National Liberation Army, What I recommend is to detect the areas of opportunity to each party and work on them. I can detect that the aforementioned lack of committed on the part of the government. On the other hand, I detected that the lack of confidence of the part of the Zapatista National Liberation Army towards the government prevents promising proposals from coming to fruition.
I understand. I totally agree that the government before has not behaved as ideal, but for that point to build trust, Mexican government wants to implement these pre-agreements and the commitments acquired, such as the San Andres Accord, because it's not to work and to achieve some more things, but to work with the accords and the commitments that have already been talked. So it's San Andres Accords, pure constitution and free, pure and informed consent, and obviously a strengthening of indigenous institutions by promoting active participation. This is very important because if you give this promotion to active participation and they are part of the decision making, they feel more important. So I want you to be like in a peace way and be and do not worry that you will have good paper in all this.
Okay, that sounds good to start and build trust, but then what?
At the same time, take into account actions that have already worked in other parts of the world with similar conflicts.
Uh, precisely that. Along with the actions to generate trust, the Mexican government was to implement actions that the New Zealand government has carried out to reach good terms with the Maori peoples. This conflict is related with the ones that it's happening with Mexican government and the indigenous people. And what is about these ideas? Well, first is the creation of a legal and political framework that recognizes and protects the rights of indigenous peoples. These agreements will allow for the establishment of a system of shared government between the government and indigenous peoples. In turn, this framework should be accomplished by actions such as, okay, we have the political framework, and adding that, it's the recognition of the territorial rights of indigenous people. This by like a concert named the land claims, and also laws to protect and promote the preservation of indigenous languages and cultures. This is something very important, the preservation of the culture.
Okay. In addition, you must act with due diligence in cases of violence or disappearance of indigenous women and girls, through juridical resources that are adequate for the victims and their families, and recognize its value within the communities, since we are recognized as the protectors and guardians of cultural values, and any violence inflicted on us is an spiritual violence. That is to say, a violence that is no longer only affects me as an individual, but also to all the collective. You should also ensure protection of their rights, regardless of their gender, sexuality, or any other situation of vulnerability. In this way, the diversity within these groups is also recognized, as well as provide support in case the victim does not speak Spanish, since not providing this support is another way of violating, discriminating, and oppressing indigenous communities.
Exactly. And as an international human rights organization, we closely monitor the situation of indigenous communities, indigenous people in Mexico. We hope that the government continues to work towards promoting and protecting the rights of the indigenous communities and building a modern and equitable state. It is important to establish effective measures to ensure that the full of effective participation or indigenous people in decision making process that affects their lives and territories. It is also essential to adopt measures to prevent remotely discrimination and exclusion of indigenous community in the social, political, economic, and the cultural life of the country.
Okay, I get both points. What I have to say is that don't worry. Rest assured that from now on it will be different, not only because I have hope and a hunch, but also because after carrying out this intercultural dialogue, it allows me to have a more comprehensive approach. And you may ask, what do I mean with this comprehension approach? Well, it's like this tool that allows me to make decisions with this famous shared understanding, and enables me to understand the needs for indigenous peoples. The comprehension approach is this tool that makes it easier for me to make decisions together with other stakeholders, just like you are. Thank you very much for all.
Okay, lastly, I would like to thank for giving me this space to speak and address the issues of colonization, discrimination, oppression, and intersectionality. And although I appreciate this opportunity, we must remember that this conversation must continue in the future, in addition to the active participation of all the perspectives and actors.
I understand. Do not worry. This will not be just live in words and in talks. We will work to achieve all what has been said here. Thank you very much for your presence.